deserving spotlight on the vital contribution volunteers make to the economic and social wellbeing of communities, most especially in regional communities, where residents particularly rely on the help of each other for services more populated areas take for granted. Last night, Mr Deputy Speaker, I had the great pleasure of hosting a dinner here in Parliament House for the 17 members of the Kadina Apex Club, my fellow members of the Kadina Apex Club, who are all proactive members of the community who give up their free time to assist individuals and groups in the Copper Coast. It's with great pleasure that I can be a part of that wonderful group that do so much for our local area. At the recent Kernowick Lowender, which is an event I talked about in here recently, another major event on the Yorke Peninsula run by volunteers, we were kept busy dismantling and setting up stages, shifting chairs at events, marshalling for the cavalcade of over 500 cars and motorcycles, and the support the club gives at multiple events is particularly noteworthy, that being just one example. Apex also upgrades local playgrounds, including last year constructing a tree climb feature in the Kadina Town Square, which has been an immense hit with the local kids in the area who spend a great deal of time climbing up and down that wonderful new playground in our local town square. And it was a tremendous fundraising effort by the Apex Club to make that sizeable playground a reality for the local area and continuing to upgrade our local town square, which is becoming quite the focal point in the Kadina CBD. The Apex Club also awards incentive scholarships for local young people to help them study and raises money for other deserving causes. Like last year, the president of the club, Adam May, led the charge to raise over $15,000 worth of hay to send over to drought-affected farmers in New South Wales. They took a big flatbed truck drove it all the way up to New South Wales, full of hay, sourced locally and funded with donations by local people. It really was a tremendous effort to help support farmers doing it tough in some difficult times. Another major project that's been running for a number of years that the Apex Club of Kadina have supported is the creation of the Copper Coast Retreat. Another mammoth job to tackle, but it's all running smoothly. And I have to say, Mr Speaker, that part of the Apex Copper Coast Retreat is a facility that helps people suffering from cancer have a free holiday at Wallaroo on the beachfront or have somewhere to stay when they're doing it tough. And they've built 3 of these wonderful retreat villas now, and it's partially funded by the Apex Postie Bike Ride, which is an initiative set up by the Apex Club and has this year crossed over the $1 million funds raised. They've raised $1 million in 10 or 11 editions of the Apex Postie Bike Ride, which is a 3-day ride up and around the Flinders Ranges on quite a number of the old postie bikes, which don't necessarily have the suspension or the give that one would normally expect would be required upon a ride up and around the Flinders Ranges. But nonetheless, they spend 3 days riding up around there, and each person raises as much money as they can. There's a minimum of $500 per rider, $500 per rider in order to qualify them to be a part of the Postie Bike Ride. But I have to make special mention of Andrew Venning, a local Kadina Apex Club member who, in his 10 years on the Postie Bike Ride, has now raised in excess of $100,000 by himself, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's truly a mammoth effort. The Copper Coast Retreat is a wonderful initiative, really appreciated by those who are doing it tough with cancer and cancer treatment, who need all the support they can get, and it's a wonderful project that the Kadina Apex Club has been involved in. So they do a wonderful job, Mr Speaker, and Mr Deputy Speaker, and it was wonderful to host them in here for dinner last night, and I know they send unanimous, strong compliments to the chef for the food that they were served. It really went over well, Mr Speaker. So well done to all the Apexians in the Narangga electorate and across the state, as well as to all such community groups like Lions and Rotary. The value of your contribution can't be measured. National Volunteers Week is a good opportunity to thank our hard-working volunteers, and I was last week pleased to join in at a morning tea gathering of volunteers hosted at Midleton by the Yorke Peninsula Council. The Yorke Peninsula Council invites all the volunteers from around their council area in to have a morning tea and a coffee as a way of saying thank you for the contribution they make, and it was pleasing to see a lot of representatives there from Coast Guard. There was ambulance volunteers there, progress associations and a whole raft of different volunteer groups, and it was pleasing to join them there and have a chat and say my own thank yous to all the work they did. So thank you to the YP Council for inviting me along to that. I also got the opportunity to attend a Volunteers Thank You event at the SOS Copper Coast at the Kadina Youth Centre. There I had the great honour of presenting a Premier Certificate of Outstanding Volunteer Service to SOS Copper Coast Chair David Boots, who has done so much for the cause of preventing suicide, as have the other volunteer committee members in the Copper Coast Suicide Prevention Network and all equally committed volunteers associated with the SOS Yorks Suicide Prevention Network. These are networks that are achieving great things to highlight the services and help available to local people and families struggling with mental health issues. And our teams of volunteers who provide on-the-ground support for the sadly rising number of people impacted by suicide. It's wonderful to present David Boots, who's done so much for that area, with that certificate. So many services across the electorate could not be provided to rural communities without volunteers who care for the people who live in their town and district and sacrifice many hours of personal home time to try and make the world they live in a better place for fellow community members. I presented David with his award at the Kadina Youth Centre, a centre that SOS Copper Coast members have worked hard at advocating for, raising funds for and created from the ground up and officially opened last year, and which I'm told is going from strength to strength with increasing numbers of youth using the centre every week, so obviously filling a gap, a needs gap and changing the lives of young people in the Copper Coast. David, as I mentioned earlier, is indeed a special volunteer who combines his hours of service for SOS Copper Coast with paid employment as a teacher and also considerable commitment of hours as a regional coordinator for volunteer ambulance services, another substantial and critical role, particularly in regional South Australia. Moonta National Trust branch members were also recognised during National Volunteers Week with Premier certificates for outstanding volunteer service. I congratulate Peter Ferguson, Barbara Bagshaw and Stephen Stock, who received their certificates at a volunteers barbecue at Moonta on the 23rd of May. Mr Ferguson has been a volunteer with the branch for 47 years, Mrs Bagshaw for 45 years and Mr Stock for 42 years, all incredible terms of service to the Moonta National Trust. Mr Stock has been chairperson for the committee since 2004 and deservedly received an OAM last year for his volunteer service to the Moonta community. What an outstanding effort by all of these people, further demonstrating a care for the community they live in and which is a better place because of their amazing contribution. Friends of Innes and Trowbridge Island also received recognition recently during a visit of a couple of weeks ago to Innes National Park from the Minister for Environment and Water, the Honourable David Spears, for the hard work they do in protecting the natural and cultural heritage on the Yorke Peninsula. It was pleasing to join the Minister celebrating the work that the Friends of Innes National Park do in the hall at Stenhouse Bay and meeting the great volunteers who have propagated and planted thousands and thousands of plants and grown out previously ugly areas and making them a beautiful part of the natural landscape. So it was wonderful to join the Minister there, and I thank him very much for the time he spent down south. There are more than 5,000 volunteers across SA who do so much work as Friends of Park group members, legwork that is impossible to do without volunteers. And on behalf of the Narungga electorate, with all its amazing natural beauty, I thank you all and reassure you that your efforts are appreciated. All volunteers across all sectors, firefighters, ambulance crews, nursing home visitors, the people who man museums and visitor information centres, drive health buses, raise money for the disadvantaged, work in charity organisations, who board our sea rescue vessels, who are first on the scene at car accidents, progress associations who advocate for projects and see them through, coaches, administrators, timekeepers and scorers from across our sporting clubs. I pay tribute to you. I pay tribute to you all and mark 2019 National Volunteers Week. Commend this wonderful motion to the House.
Member for Giles.
It's always great to get up and be in